When my son told me, "You betrayed Mom, you betrayed me, and after that you want to talk about the future? Get out." I did not raise my voice. I did not beg. I did not remind him of the mortgage payments I'd quietly covered for 3 years, the medical deductible I'd paid when his wife forgot to submit the claim, the tuition installments that always seemed to land on my shoulders when their budget mysteriously tightened. I simply nodded, took one slow breath, and walked out of the house I'd helped build with my own hands. By New Year's Day, the locks on that front door were changed. By the end of January, the bank was calling him every morning. And by Valentine's Day, he finally understood what betrayal actually looked like. He just didn't realize his wife was the one holding the knife, and that I'd been watching her hands the whole time. I need you to understand something before you judge what I did next. I am not a cruel man. I am not a vindictive man. I'm the kind of man who kept the same lunch pail for 20 years, who still folds his shirts the way my late wife taught me, who pays his bills 2 weeks early because he hates owing anyone anything. I'm also a grandfather. And when you become a grandfather, your heart gets split into smaller pieces you can't control. One piece stays with the child you raised, no matter how badly he hurts you. Another piece goes to the grandchildren, and that piece is the one that will make you do things you never thought you were capable of. That night, the piece that belonged to my grandchildren was the only thing keeping me from going back inside and saying something I couldn't take back. Because the moment Michael spat those words at me, I saw my late wife's face in my mind, Margaret, in her hospice bed, breath shallow, fingers cold, eyes still fierce. She had squeezed my hand 2 days before she died and whispered, "Promise me you'll protect them, even if they hate you for it." I promised. And then my own son stood in a doorway, living in a house my money had kept upright, calling me a betrayer. I walked down his front steps slowly, because my knees aren't what they used to be, and because anger can make an old man reckless. My truck was parked at the curb. I could see the warm glow of their living room behind the curtains, could hear the faint sound of music from their speaker system, one I bought them last summer because Michael said it helped him de-stress. Behind the glass I saw a shadow pass the window. Isabella, his wife. She didn't come to the door. She didn't call my name. She didn't ask what happened. But I felt her there, like a presence that had been steering this ship long before my son ever realized the wheel was in her hands. I slid into my truck and sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house number like it might change into something else if I stared hard enough. Then I made the mistake of checking my phone. I had 2 missed calls from Michael earlier in the day, both ignored. One text from him, sent an hour before I'd arrived. "We need to talk about Dad's future. Important. Please come by." Dad's future. Those words should have meant concern, love, planning. But I've spent 40 years negotiating contracts and reading people. When someone says your future with a tight voice and no details, it usually means they're planning to move your pieces around a board without asking permission. I turned the key, drove home, and didn't go inside right away. I sat in my driveway for a long time, watching my porch light cast a pale circle on the steps. My house was smaller than Michael's, older, paid off, quiet in a way that sometimes felt peaceful and sometimes felt like a grave. Margaret's rose bushes lined the walkway. Even in winter, their bare stems looked stubborn, refusing to admit the season had beaten them. I finally went inside, hung my coat on the hook Margaret installed 25 years ago, and walked to the kitchen. Her mug was still in the cabinet. I never use it. I can't. Instead, I poured myself coffee I didn't want and sat at the table where she used to sit across from me, tapping her finger against a crossword puzzle, rolling her eyes when I tried to help. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight. And then, as if the universe wanted to test me one more time, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. One line. "Do not sign anything they give you. You are not safe." I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I read it again, slower. "Do not sign anything." You are not safe. My first instinct was to call Michael and demand an explanation. My second instinct, Margaret's instinct, the one she'd trained into me over decades, was to stay silent and observe. Because whoever sent that message knew something. And if Michael truly believed I'd betrayed his mother, why would he want my signature on anything? Unless the betrayal story was just the leash they used to drag me where they wanted me. I set my coffee down and opened the drawer beneath the phone where I kept the old folder Margaret insisted we maintain. Wills, insurance, property deeds, trust paperwork. Michael hated that folder. He'd roll his eyes and call it my doom binder. Margaret called it responsibility. I pulled it out and flipped through it until my fingers landed on the document I hadn't looked at since the day Margaret died. The trust. Margaret's trust. A simple, brutal arrangement. She'd inherited money from her father. Quiet, old money she never talked about because she didn't like what it did to people. When her father died, she put every cent into a family trust with conditions that made our lawyer raise his eyebrows. The primary beneficiary was Michael. The contingent beneficiaries were our grandchildren, and the trustee was me. Not Michael, not Isabella, me. And there were clauses, pages of clauses, the kind written by someone who loved fiercely and trusted cautiously. One clause in particular had kept me awake a few nights in the first year after her death, because it felt like Margaret speaking from the grave. If my son attempts to remove my husband from his home, place him into an assisted living facility against his will, or coerce his signature through intimidation or deceit, the trustee is instructed to suspend discretionary distributions to my son and instead distribute funds directly into educational and living trusts for the grandchildren. Margaret had seen something coming. Maybe she saw it in Isabella. Maybe she saw it in Michael's weakness. Maybe she saw it in both. I ran my thumb along the paper's edge, breathing slowly. Then I picked up my phone and made one call. Not to Michael, not to Isabella, to my lawyer. Janet Morrison answered on the second ring, voice sharp and awake despite the hour. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste syllables. Mr. Harris. Janet, I said, I need you in your office at 8. A pause. What happened? My son threw me out of his house and asked for my signature on something he won't explain. Another pause, longer this time. Then her voice changed, still professional but colder. Do you have the paperwork with you? I do. Do not sign anything. Do not meet them alone. And do not tell them you called me. I wasn't planning to. Good, she said. Bring every document you have. And Mr. Harris? Yes. If they're already using words like betrayal, they've already decided you're the villain. That means they won't feel guilty doing ugly things to you. I ended the call and sat in silence. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once. I looked around my kitchen, at the chair where Margaret used to sit, at the faint scratch marks on the table from Michael's childhood homework, at the calendar still hanging on the wall, even though I never turned it past the month Margaret died. I whispered into the empty room, I promised you. And then I opened my laptop. Michael didn't know everything I did for him. That wasn't an accident. When you cover someone's bills quietly, you learn their financial veins. You learn where the money flows, where it clots, where it leaks. Michael and Isabella lived like a couple who thought the world owed them softness. A house too big, cars too new, vacations too frequent, a kitchen remodeled twice in 4 years because Isabella's aesthetic evolved. Michael's salary did not support that. Mine did. But my money didn't just float into their life like a blessing. It went through channels, auto-pay schedules, loan guarantees. A second mortgage I co-signed when Michael swore it was temporary. A private agreement with their bank manager because I'd worked with that man's father years ago and he still respected my name. I logged into my bank. I clicked through payments. There it was. Mortgage payment to First Northern. Scheduled. Recurring. $3,240. I stared at it for a moment, then clicked cancel. A simple action. A simple... One button. One quiet sentence on the screen. This payment has been canceled. I didn't stop there. Car payment. Canceled. Insurance premium I'd been covering under the guise of group discount. Canceled. The credit card I'd opened in my name but handed to Isabella when she cried about needing a little cushion. Frozen. Every click felt like a door closing. Not slammed. Closed. Calm. Deliberate. I wasn't trying to destroy my son. I was removing the lie that had allowed him to disrespect me while pretending he stood on his own feet. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened the photo folder on my phone. There was a picture from last spring. My granddaughter Lily in the backyard, missing 2 front teeth, holding a lemonade stand sign she'd made with crooked letters. I remembered how proud she'd been when she counted the money. $12.70. She'd handed it to me like it was gold and whispered, "It's for you, Grandpa, for helping me." I put the phone down and felt something shift inside me. Michael had thrown me out, yes, but Lily was still in that house. My grandson Owen, too. Quiet boy, observant eyes, the kind of child who watches adults the way adults think children don't. And if an unknown number was warning me, if my lawyer was warning me, it meant Michael and Isabella weren't just angry. They were planning. The next morning I drove to Janet's office with the trust folder on the passenger seat like it weighed 100 pounds. Janet read everything without speaking, flipping pages with quick fingers, marking sections with a pen. When she finished, she leaned back and looked at me. "They want guardianship," she said. I blinked once. "What?" "They're building a case," she said. "They're going to claim you're not competent, that you're grieving, confused, forgetful, that you need help managing your assets." "I'm not confused." "I know," she said. "But the court doesn't know you. They know paperwork and the story they tell." I thought of the text message. "Isabella?" I said. Janet's eyes narrowed. "Probably. She's the type?" "She's the type that smiles while she's measuring your neck for a collar." Janet nodded once. "Then we get ahead of it." "How?" She slid a sheet of paper across the desk. A list, steps, actions. Not revenge, defense. "First," she said, "medical evaluation, independent. We document competency." "Fine." "Second," she said, "we update your estate plan today. We reinforce the trust protections for your grandchildren." "Do it." "Third," she said, "we document financial coercion. Do you have proof you've been paying their expenses?" I stared at her. I didn't like where this was going, but I understood. "I have everything," I said quietly. "Every transfer, every check, every loan agreement." Janet's mouth tightened. "Good, because if this becomes a fight, facts matter more than feelings." Then she leaned forward. "And fourth," she said, "we control the narrative." I exhaled slowly. "Meaning?" "Meaning they threw you out. That's abandonment. If they try to paint you as unstable, we show the court what unstable really looks like." I thought of Michael's face in that doorway, twisted with anger that looked rehearsed, like lines he'd practiced under Isabella's coaching. "You betrayed Mom," he'd said. "Why would he say that?" I asked, more to myself than to Janet. Janet's pen tapped the desk once. "Tell me about Margaret's death." I swallowed. Even after all this time, saying it out loud felt like pressing a bruise. "Cancer," I said. "Fast at the end. Hospice. At home." "And your son?" Janet asked, voice careful. "Was he there?" "He came," I said. But Isabella didn't like the way the house smelled. She said it was depressing. Michael stayed one night and left early because Isabella said the kids needed him. Janet nodded slowly. "So he wasn't there when she passed?" "No." And did Margaret leave any letters? My throat tightened. Yes, I admitted. One. For Michael. Sealed. Janet's eyebrows rose. Where is it? In my safe. Has Michael seen it? No. Janet's gaze held mine. Then I would bet my license Isabella's telling him something about that letter, something she wants him to believe. I felt a cold, steady anger bloom behind my ribs, not hot rage, something worse, something clear. What do I do? I asked. Janet looked at the trust papers again. You let them make their move, she said, but you make sure they do it on your terms. 3 days later, Michael called me. His voice was softer than the night he threw me out, but I could hear strain underneath it. Dad, he said, we need to talk. I thought you made that clear, I replied. You told me to get out. A pause, then carefully. I was upset. Why? I asked. Silence again. Then the words, slower now, like he was reading from a script. Isabella found Mom's old journal, he said. And there are things in it, things you never told me. My grip tightened on the phone. Margaret didn't keep journals. Not like that. She kept recipe cards, lists, notes tucked into drawers that said things like, don't forget to call Michael on Tuesday, and pick up Lily's birthday gift. Margaret didn't keep a journal, I said. Michael's breath caught. Then he recovered fast. She did. Maybe you didn't know. But she wrote about you. About me, I repeated. Yes, he said, voice rising. About what you did. About how you betrayed her. About how you were never who I thought you were. There it was. The poison. Not just anger. Rewriting. Isabella was trying to rewrite Margaret. And if she could rewrite Margaret, she could rewrite me. Make me the villain. Make Michael feel justified doing whatever came next. I kept my voice level. What do you want, Michael? A pause and then, we want to meet. Talk about the future. The same word. Future. I pictured Isabella beside him, nodding, whispering. I said, where? At our house, he replied quickly. Tonight, after the kids go to bed. No, I said. What? He snapped. We meet in public, I said. And we bring lawyers. His voice sharpened. Dad, why are you making this into a battle? Because you already did, I said, when you threw me out like a stranger. Silence. Then a softer voice, slipping into the call like a blade sliding from a sleeve. Isabella. Mr. Harris, she said, Michael is hurting. We're trying to heal. But you're being difficult. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch until she couldn't stand it. Isabella, I said calmly, stop talking like you're my family. Her breath hitched. What did you do to our payments? Michael demanded suddenly, voice breaking. The bank called. They said, I canceled what I was paying, I said. You're an adult. You can't do that, Isabella snapped. Those were arrangements. They were charity, I said, and you confused charity with obligation. Michael's voice trembled. Dad, we're going to lose the house. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered Lily's lemonade stand. I remembered Owen's quiet eyes. And I remembered the text warning me not to sign anything. I'm not meeting you at night, I said. We meet tomorrow at noon. Riverside Cafe. Janet Morrison will be there. Isabella laughed, sharp and joyless. You hired a lawyer? Over a family conversation? No, I said. Over a scheme. Michael's breathing turned ragged. Dad, what are you talking about? You'll find out, I said. "Bring the journal." Isabella's voice dropped to something cold. "We'll bring what we have, and you'll bring what you've been hiding." Then she hung up. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room with the lamp on, Margaret's letter in my safe calling to me like a living thing. I took it out at 2:11 a.m. and held it in my hands. It was addressed to Michael in Margaret's handwriting. The last time I'd seen that handwriting, she'd been too weak to lift a spoon. The envelope was sealed. Margaret had looked at me and whispered, "Not until he's ready. You'll know." I thought about what Isabella was doing, twisting my son, using my wife's memory like a tool. I thought about Michael's words in that doorway. "You betrayed Mom." I wondered what it would do to him if he read Margaret's final truth. Would it save him? Or would it break him? I put the envelope back. Not yet. Noon the next day. Riverside Cafe smelled like burnt coffee and cheap syrup, but it was bright and public with windows on every side. Janet arrived first, carrying a folder thick enough to make a point without saying a word. Michael and Isabella walked in 5 minutes late. Michael looked like he hadn't slept either. His eyes were red, his jaw tight, his shoulders hunched like a man carrying a weight he didn't understand. Isabella looked perfect. Hair done, makeup flawless, a calm smile that belonged on a television host, and in her hand, a leather-bound book. I felt my stomach tighten. She placed it on the table like evidence. Michael wouldn't meet my eyes. Isabella did. "Mr. Harris," she said sweetly, "thank you for agreeing to talk." Janet didn't bother with sweetness. "Isabella," she said. "Michael, sit." They sat. Isabella opened the book and slid it toward me, her manicured finger tapping a page. "I found this in a box of Margaret's things," she said. "Hidden. Hidden." Of course she used that word. My hands stayed in my lap. Janet's voice cut through. "Before we discuss any documents, I want to be very clear. My client will not sign anything today. He is here to listen, to respond, and to protect his legal interests." Michael flinched. Isabella's smile didn't move, but her eyes sharpened. "We don't need signatures," she said. "We need honesty." Then she turned to Michael and squeezed his hand like a performance. "Tell him," she whispered. Michael swallowed hard and finally looked at me. "Dad," he said, voice raw, "why did Mom write that you love someone else?" My throat went dry. Janet's gaze flicked to me, asking silently if I wanted her to stop this. I shook my head once. "Show me the page," I said. Isabella turned the book so I could see. The handwriting looked like Margaret's at first glance. But I've watched my wife write grocery lists for 40 years. I've watched her sign Christmas cards, write notes, fill out school forms. Handwriting isn't just letters. It's rhythm, pressure, the way a person's hand moves when they're thinking. This was close. But it wasn't hers. It was an imitation, a careful imitation, a forgery. I looked up slowly. Isabella's eyes held mine steady. She thought she'd won. I turned the book back toward her and said quietly, "This isn't Margaret's." Michael's face twisted. "What?" Isabella's voice stayed smooth. "Of course it is." "It's not," I said, "and you know it." Janet leaned forward. "Isabella, where did you get this?" "I told you," Isabella replied. "A box." Janet's pen tapped once. "Which box?" Isabella's smile faltered for the first time. "One of them." Janet nodded, like a teacher listening to a child lie. Then she opened her folder and slid a document across the table. "Mr. Harris had an independent forensic handwriting analyst examine copies of Margaret's known writing," Janet said, "and compare them to what you call a journal." Michael's eyes widened. "Dad, I didn't want to believe it either," I said. Isabella's nails pressed into the leather cover of the fake journal. Janet continued, voice clinical. The analyst found significant inconsistencies: letter formation, pressure points, slant variation, and baseline drift. The conclusion is that the journal entries are not authentic. Michael stared at the book like it had turned into a snake. Isabella's voice turned colder. "That's ridiculous. Anyone can pay someone to say anything." Janet didn't blink. "True, which is why we also pulled fingerprints from the cover." Isabella's eyes flicked, just once, to the exit. Janet slid another paper forward. "The only fingerprints on the journal belong to you, Isabella." Michael's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I watched my son's world tilt, and I felt something ugly and sad in my chest. Because despite everything, he still wanted to believe his wife. He still wanted an explanation that didn't require him to admit he'd been used. Isabella's voice snapped. "This is harassment." Janet's tone stayed calm. "No, this is evidence." Michael's hands trembled. "Bella, what is this?" Isabella turned to him, eyes wide, voice softening into practiced tears. "Your father is manipulating you," she whispered. "He's always controlled you. He controlled your mother. He's doing it again." And then, like a trap snapping shut, she reached into her purse and pulled out a second folder. She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. "Fine," she said, voice hard now. "If you want evidence, here's ours." Janet opened it and scanned the top page. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten. She slid it to me. It was a petition. Guardianship. Temporary emergency guardianship. They were claiming I was mentally unfit and a danger to myself. They wanted the court to appoint Michael and Isabella to manage my finances for my protection. Michael looked sick. "I didn't," he started. Isabella cut him off. "You agreed. We talked about it. Dad is unstable." Unstable. I looked at my son, and I could see the moment he realized what future talk really meant. Not planning, control. He whispered, "Dad, I didn't know she already filed." Janet's eyes snapped up. "You filed." Isabella lifted her chin. "Yes, because someone has to do what's best." "What's best for who?" I asked quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "For this family." Janet's voice sharpened. "You understand this is a serious allegation. If the court believes you acted in bad faith—" Isabella slammed her palm lightly on the table. "Then he shouldn't have acted like a bitter old man. He canceled our payments. He's trying to ruin us." I leaned forward, and for the first time since the night Michael threw me out, I let my voice carry weight. "Isabella," I said, "you don't get to call it ruin when it was never yours." Michael stared at me, tears threatening. "Dad," he whispered, "please just tell me. Why would you do this? Why would Mom—" I took a breath. I could have pulled out Margaret's letter then. I could have shattered everything at once. But I wasn't here to punish Michael with truth like a weapon. I was here to protect Lily and Owen. So I did what Margaret always did when she wanted someone to see clearly. I asked one question. "Michael," I said, "who sent me a text telling me not to sign anything?" Michael blinked. "What text?" Janet slid her phone across the table and showed him a screenshot. Michael's eyes widened. He looked at Isabella. Isabella's face stayed blank. Michael whispered, "Who would even have your number?" I watched his mind work, slow and painful. Then his gaze dropped to the fake journal, then to the guardianship petition, then back to Isabella. "Bella," he said, voice breaking, Did you have someone warn him?" Isabella's eyes flashed with anger. For a second her mask slipped, just enough. Then she recovered. "Of course not," she said, but her voice was a fraction too quick. And Owen walked into the cafe. He shouldn't have been there. He was 13. Quiet kid, always reading, always watching. He stood in the doorway with his backpack on, eyes scanning until they landed on me. Then he walked to our table like he'd made a decision he couldn't undo. Michael's face drained of color. "Owen," he whispered, "what are you doing here?" Owen didn't look at him. He looked at Isabella, and then he looked at me. His voice was small but steady. "Grandpa," he said, "Mom told me to come. She said if you didn't sign, I should give you this." He reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope. My name on it, in Isabella's handwriting. I didn't touch it. Janet took it with gloved hands from her bag because Janet thinks of things I don't when my heart is pounding. She opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. Me, taken from across the street outside my own house 2 nights earlier, and beneath it a typed note. "If you don't cooperate, we will tell the court you're dangerous. We will make sure you never see the children again." Michael made a sound like he'd been punched. Isabella's face went pale. Owen's voice shook. "She said you're the reason Grandma died. She said you're trying to steal our house. But I heard her on the phone. She said Grandpa's money is for us, and you're in the way." The cafe went quiet around us. Even the waitress froze near the counter. Michael stared at Isabella like he'd never seen her before. "Bella," he whispered, "what did you do?" Isabella's eyes darted again toward the door. Janet's voice turned razor calm. "Thank you, Owen. You just prevented extortion and witness intimidation." Isabella hissed, "He's a child." Janet didn't flinch. "He's a witness." Michael's chair scraped as he stood, shaking. "Is this true?" Isabella stood too, fury replacing fear. "Sit down. Do not do this here." Michael's voice rose. "You forged Mom's writing." Isabella snapped. "I did what I had to do. You were weak. You still are." That word hit him like a slap. Weak. Michael's face crumpled. And in that moment I saw my son as a little boy again, standing behind my wife's legs when strangers came to the door, trusting her to translate the world for him. Isabella had replaced Margaret in his mind. She had been translating, and she'd been lying. Janet stood and spoke to the room, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. "I'm calling law enforcement," she said. "We have evidence of attempted guardianship fraud, forged documents, coercion, and extortion." Isabella's eyes went wild. She grabbed Michael's sleeve. "We're leaving. Now!" Michael jerked away like her touch burned. "No," he said, voice shaking. "No, you used my mother's memory." Isabella's face twisted. "Your father used you first. He controlled your life." Michael shouted, "Stop!" The sound cracked through the cafe like something breaking. Isabella flinched. Then she did the one thing she didn't expect herself to do. She turned and ran. Janet moved fast for a woman in heels, stepping into Isabella's path. Isabella shoved her. Janet stumbled, caught herself, and the cafe door opened again, this time with a uniformed officer stepping in, because Janet had quietly pressed an emergency contact button on her phone while Isabella was screaming. The officer saw Isabella mid-stride, saw Janet's expression, saw the scattered documents, and his hand went to his radio. I didn't move. I sat there, old hands folded, watching the consequences arrive like winter. Isabella tried to talk her way out. She tried tears, then anger, then threats. None of it worked. They escorted her out in front of everyone. Michael stood there shaking, watching his wife's wrists being guided behind her back. He looked like a man waking up in someone else's life. Owen stood beside me, shoulders hunched, eyes bright with fear. I reached out slowly and put my hand on his arm. "You did the right thing," I said quietly. Owen's lip trembled. "Is Dad going to hate me?" Michael heard that, and I watched my son's face change. He turned to Owen and dropped to one knee in the middle of the cafe, right there on the tile floor. His voice cracked. "No," he whispered. "No, buddy, I'm sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have listened to Grandpa." Owen's shoulders sagged like something heavy finally slid off him. He nodded once. And that was when I finally felt the first true sting of what I'd done. Not canceling payments, not calling a lawyer, not letting Isabella get arrested. The sting was seeing my son realize how badly he'd failed his own child. Because betrayal doesn't just wound the person you betray. It poisons everyone watching. After the police took statements, after the cafe emptied, after Owen was picked up by my neighbor Mrs. Duval because Michael's hands were shaking too hard to drive, Janet and I sat across from Michael in her office. Michael looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. He kept rubbing his wedding ring like it was cutting into him. He finally whispered, "Dad, I threw you out." I didn't answer right away. I let him sit with it. Then I said, "Yes." Tears slid down his cheeks. I believed her. "Yes," I said again. He flinched at the calmness. "You're not even angry," he whispered. "I was," I admitted, "but anger is expensive, and you already cost me enough." Michael's shoulders shook. Janet slid a document toward him. "This is a temporary protective order," she said. "Given the threats, Isabella will not be allowed near Mr. Harris or the children until a judge reviews the case." Michael nodded mechanically. "And this," Janet continued, "is the notice that distributions from Margaret's trust to you are suspended." Michael's head snapped up. "What?" Janet's gaze held his. "Margaret wrote very clear conditions. You attempted to remove Mr. Harris from your home and coercively gain control of his assets. That triggers a suspension." Michael's face went ashen. "Dad," he whispered, "please. The mortgage—" I held up a hand. "Listen," I said. "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to protect Lily and Owen." Michael swallowed hard. "And," I continued, "to honor your mother." Michael's eyes filled again. "Dad, did Mom leave me anything? Anything real?" I looked at Janet. She nodded slightly. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the sealed envelope. Michael stared at it like it might explode. "My whole life," he whispered, "you kept things from me." "No," I said softly. "I kept things for you." His hand shook as he took the envelope. He hesitated, looking up at me like a child asking permission. I nodded once. He tore it open. He unfolded the letter. He read. And as he read, his face changed in waves. Confusion, shock, then something that looked like grief so deep it hollowed him out. He whispered, "Dad." Tears spilled onto the paper. Margaret had written about Isabella, not by name, but by nature. She had written about how some people do not love, they acquire. She had written that Michael was kind but weak, and that weakness would be exploited unless he learned to stand upright. She had written that if he ever turned against his father, it would not be because his father betrayed him. It would be because someone convinced him that loyalty was shameful. And then, at the end, Margaret wrote one sentence that shattered what little pride Michael had left. "I forgave your father for the only thing he ever hid from you, because he hid it to protect you. Do not punish him for my peace." Michael looked up, eyes wide, voice trembling. "The only thing," he whispered. "What does that mean?" I exhaled slowly. This was the moment I had tried to avoid. But Margaret had known it would come. So I told him. Not every detail, not cruelty, just the truth that mattered. "The year you were 15, I said, your mother and I almost divorced." Michael froze. I kept my voice steady. "She was lonely," I continued. "I was working too much. I was trying to build a life. I thought providing was the same as being present. It wasn't." Michael's lips parted. "Dad, your mother made a mistake," I said. "One mistake. One man. One night. And then she came home and told me, crying, begging, saying she wanted her family more than anything." Michael's face tightened in pain. "She told me you might not be mine," I said quietly, "and she offered to tell you, to test, to blow everything apart. Michael's breath hitched. And I said no, I said. Because you were mine, not by blood, by every night I sat beside your bed when you had fever, every game I attended, every scraped knee I cleaned, every time you called me Dad and meant it. Michael's hands covered his mouth. I stayed, I said. Not because I was weak, because I loved you, and I loved her, and we built a life anyway. Michael whispered, broken. So when I said you betrayed Mom, I didn't let him finish. You betrayed yourself, I said, not cruelly, but honestly. And you let someone else use your mother's ghost as a weapon. Michael sobbed. Janet looked down at her folder, giving him what dignity she could. After a long time, Michael whispered, "What happens now?" I leaned forward, voice low. "Now," I said, "you fix what you broke. And I decide what you're allowed to rebuild with." He nodded, desperate. "Tell me. Anything." I stared at my son, my grown son, my wounded son, and I felt both love and disappointment so heavy it could have crushed me if I let it. So I gave him terms, not as punishment, as structure. First, I said, Isabella doesn't come near the children, not until court says otherwise, and I will fight to keep it that way. Michael nodded fiercely. Second, I said, you stop spending money you don't have. You sell the second car. You downsize if you have to. Michael flinched but nodded. Third, I said, you earn trust back, with time, with actions, not with words. He whispered, yes. And fourth, I said, you don't call me a betrayer again, not unless you want to learn what betrayal really looks like. Michael's eyes met mine and something steadier appeared there. He whispered, I'm sorry. I nodded once. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. The months that followed were not clean. Isabella fought like an animal cornered. She tried to paint me as controlling. She tried to claim I manipulated Owen. She tried to cry on the stand. But evidence doesn't care about tears. The forged journal, the threats, the guardianship petition filed before any family talk, her fingerprints, her handwriting, and then Owen's testimony, quiet, trembling, honest, about his mother telling him to deliver the threat to me. That's the part that made the judge's eyes harden. Because a person who uses her child as a messenger for intimidation is not confused. She is calculated. The judge issued a long-term protective order for me and the children. Isabella got supervised visitation only, contingent on counseling and compliance. Michael filed for divorce. The house was the final lesson. Michael wanted to keep it. Of course he did. It was where Lily measured her height on the pantry wall, where Owen had hidden under the stairs during thunderstorms. But love is not enough to keep a roof standing if the finances rot underneath. When I canceled the payments, I didn't do it to watch them drown. I did it to force them to stop pretending the water wasn't rising. Michael worked 2 jobs for a while. He sold the second car. He took on overtime he should have taken years earlier. And still, the house was too much, so he sold it. Not in a dramatic foreclosure, in an orderly sale. And when the closing check arrived, he called me, not to beg, to offer. Dad, he said, voice steadier than it used to be, I want you to take this. It's yours. You kept us afloat. You deserved better. I was quiet for a long moment. Then I said, put it in the kids' accounts, every cent. Michael's breath shook. Dad, that money, I said, is your penance, not your payment. He whispered, okay. The final twist, the one Isabella never saw coming, was that Margaret's trust did exactly what she designed it to do. It did not reward my son for weakness. It did not reward Isabella for scheming. It bypassed them both and protected the children. Lily's college fund grew quietly. Owen's therapy sessions were paid for without Michael having to beg. And when Michael tried to argue that he should regain distributions, Janet simply pointed to the clause Michael had triggered with his own hands. He didn't fight it. He accepted it. That's how I knew he had begun to change. A year later, on Christmas Eve, my front doorbell rang. I opened it and found Michael standing on my porch with Lily and Owen beside him. No gifts, no grand gesture, just them. Michael's eyes were wet. He swallowed hard and said, "Dad, can we come in?" I looked at my grandchildren. Lily smiled shyly. Owen's eyes held mine. Steady now. I stepped back. "Come in," I said. And as they walked past me into my small, warm house, I felt something inside me loosen. A knot that had been tight since the day Margaret died. Michael stopped in my living room and looked around at the framed photo of Margaret on the shelf. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he whispered, "I was wrong." I didn't answer. I walked to the kitchen and pulled the turkey from the oven the way I used to when Margaret was alive, the smell filling the house with something that felt like memory and promise. Behind me, I heard Michael's voice break as he said to his children, "We don't forget who stood for us, even when we didn't deserve it." That was the moment the story finally ended. Not with Isabella in handcuffs, not with a bank calling, not with paperwork stamped by a judge, but with my son standing under my roof again, finally understanding that a man can be betrayed, thrown out, lied about, and still choose to protect the people who hurt him. Because that's what grandfathers do, and if anyone ever tries to use a dead woman's memory to steal from her children again, they'll learn the lesson Isabella learned too late. Margaret may be gone, but her promises were written in ink, and mine were written in blood.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales like this, hit subscribe.